Hey, welcome back to Toyless of Titles. My name is Justin Stevens. I'm back to give the breakdown, the preseason breakdown for the Baltimore Ravens. I apologize for the delay in these breakdowns. We had another episode in between, some vacation time taken. We are back at it, though, and we are on to the AFC North. That's who I'm going to start breaking down next. I'm going to kick it off here with, as I said, the Baltimore Ravens. So the Baltimore Ravens are obviously the clear-cut favorites to win the AFC North. And as usual, I'm going to go ahead and start off my breakdown with my fantasy studs. Obviously, Lamar Jackson is the fantasy stud to have on the team. And I put in my notes just to refer to the player profiler. If you actually do need any kind of a breakdown, there are some. Hold on one second. Apologize for that. My dog needed out the back door here. So anyway, all right. He was number one in passing touchdowns. His rushing opportunities were crazy good. He was number one across the board in almost virtually every stat with rushing. And rushing, as we've talked about before, that's like using a Madden football cheat code in fantasy football, and there's no way to stop it. He was second in rushing touchdowns, but that it really didn't matter. He's obviously going to see some negative regression, so he's going to bounce back a little bit more towards the mean. But even whenever that happens, he's still going to be crazy good. He's still going to be at the very least, a top two, maybe top three quarterback. But the downside, though, and I'm also going to kind of include this a little bit as a possible letdown, is that if you do draft him extremely high, then that means on the very few weeks that he may not score absolutely first in your league or even top two in fantasy points, then you have taken a hit that week that's really big because you passed up on a big running back, big wide receiver, or whatever. That hurts your possible flex positions as well. So essentially, if you draft a quarterback as high as you're going to have to draft Lamar or Mahomes for that matter, then you need them to score that high. So especially in one quarterback leagues, I'm steering away from drafting him just because of that reason, because I know he's going to go way higher than I'm willing to pay. So another fantasy stud, Mark Andrews. Last year, Mark Andrews was like the third or fourth tight end in your league, depending on what your scoring format was. In my notes here, in points per game, he was fifth overall. But here's the thing about Mark Andrews that you need to remember. 43.2% snap share. So more than half of the time, he wasn't even on the field for the Ravens. Now, granted, he only played 15 games, so he did miss a game, but even still, that should not drop it that much. So he was well under 50% of the time on the field for the Ravens and still scored, like I said, top three, top four fantasy points overall in the season for your team if you had him. And the team was last in passes per game. So, and then also Hayden Hurst, who just went to the Atlanta Falcons, had a 9.4 target share, 9.4% target share. So that means that, almost 10% of the time that Lamar Jackson was throwing the ball, it was to Hayden Hurst, who was the backup tight end. So now that he's gone, they don't have another guy that is taking over that role. They do have a third tight end that's just going to continue to be a backup that'll take some of those targets, I'm sure. But I see no reason why Mark Andrews isn't going to be on the field for more than that 43.2% of the time. So he's going to be on the field a heck of a lot more. He was number one in deep targets because he loves to run down the seam, and Lamar was able to hit him down that seam a lot. It's a matchup nightmare for opposing linebackers trying to guard this guy. So this is one of the few guys that I actually see possibly doing even better than he did, them utilizing him more. I also see them trying to contain Lamar Jackson's rushing more, which is going to cause him to have to throw the ball more. So Jackson's efficiency rate might go down a bit on his passing efficiency rates, But for his wide receivers, that should add a bump. And by wide receivers, I also mean his tight end, Mark Andrews. Stay tuned for breakdown. Actually, I don't think I keep forgetting to do this. So anyway, yeah. So stay tuned for breakouts. Stay tuned for breakouts. So for the breakouts, I've got J.K. Dobbins. So let's pull up Dobbins here. Dobbins is being drafted at the 502 overall, and Ingram is being drafted at the. Wait. I'm sorry. Let me backtrack. I have no real breakouts, okay? Here's the reason I have no real breakouts, though. I have no real breakouts because I feel like they're all kind of being drafted about where they probably should be drafted. And with Dobbins being a 502, he almost has to do extremely well to make it worth your while. And Ingram being drafted as a 408, I think is kind of unrealistic because I think J.K. Dobbins is going to get a lot of carries, a lot more so than what like Justice Hill or anybody else in that, in Gus or any of the other guys in that backfield got last season from Ingram. So I think they're just going to eat away at each other. That's why I have them both listed as a beware of letdown. If anybody could potentially break out, it might be Marquise Brown. But even, unfortunately, he's being drafted at the 507, so it's a little bit higher than I'd like to see because that's the 28th wide receiver overall. In order for him to break out, he's going to need to be top 15 probably, maybe top 20 to be considered a breakout, and I don't know that he's going to be able to do that since the amount of passing attempts is so low in Baltimore. So, but I do look for him to improve on last season, but I don't know about breaking out. So I have all three of these guys listed actually as potential letdowns, mostly for that reason. But again, with Marquise Brown, I wrote down some extra stats here. He did have a 23% target share to help him, but again, to end at the wide receiver 28 or better seems pretty realistic because I do think there will be more passing attempts, but to finish that high, I don't know that we can call him a breakout. He had 19% target share last season and ended at wide receiver 49 in total points per game last season. So, and that was at 19% target share. So I see. So the 23% was my estimate. If he bumps up, if they have to throw the ball more and he gets more looks because of the Hayden Hurst void, then maybe he gets up to a 23% target share. Then he should be able to perform at about where he's being taken, but there's no guarantees on that. So at best, he's going to perform where his average draft position is. So I would avoid drafting him unless you can get him a little bit later than that 507 to try to get value on him. Mark Ingram at the 408, he's 15 total touchdowns last season. I see that number going back. Let's see. He was averaging pretty much almost 7 touchdowns per year his first 8 seasons. So for him to jump all of a sudden up to 15, it makes sense because this is a run-heavy offense, and run-heavy offenses also bode well for running backs catching out of the backfield, which he did a lot more of last season. So it is very possible there's potential there for him to continue to do really well, but he's being drafted at the 408, so that's kind of and on a lot of teams that's your RB2, and I don't know that he's going to be able to get that constant heavy workload with J.K. Dobbins there. So that's also kind of a potential letdown there. All right, my Mr. Reliable. At their ADPs, it's really pretty much nobody with this team because, like I said, that makes sense. They are an explosive team. They were an explosive team last season, and let's face it, they're going to be explosive again this season with Lamar Jackson behind center. But they are about to be overdrafted across the board, so that's why it's okay to miss out on this offense. Again, every single position here is being overdrafted. Mark Andrews is probably close to the only one that may not be being overdrafted, but even still, you don't want to go too super high on your tight ends anyway. Because like I said, unless it's a 2 tight end league, then obviously you're drafting them even higher, but that's going to skew the ADP as well. So, but anyway, the last I have for you are the IDP names to know. IDP names to know. I only wrote down one, and that's because I feel like Patrick Queen could potentially be a huge hit in Dynasty. He's a linebacker out of LSU. He's a rookie this season. He was the 5th linebacker taken in the draft, but he fits this defense perfectly. This particular defense always bodes well for linebackers, and Queen can play coverage. He can stop the run. He can hit the holes. That should be wide open in this defense. There should be a lot of holes for him to hit because that front 4 are so good. So I can see Patrick Queen potentially being a huge bonus for the Ravens. And I believe that's all I have for you guys today. Thank you very much for catching the show. Probably later tonight, I will do the rest of the AFC North. So that's the Browns, the Bengals, and the Steelers. So thank you very much.